One of the most difficult things about pastoral leadership, about giving people pastoral care, is caring for them more than they care for themselves. It becomes really hard to invest in somebody's life and they don't really want it. And I think it's really, really important to understand that people have to take responsibility for themselves, or they're not willing, or they're not going to move forward in the long run. You actually end up developing a codependent relationship. And I've had this happen a ton of times where one of two ways. Some people, the only way that it seems like they'll ever move forward is that if they jump on you and squeeze the life out of you, they want all of your care. And there's another group of people that really don't want any care. And the problem is that those people that don't really want any care, you're not really going to be able to help them until they get to the place of really brokenness that they actually would like some help, that they'll trust somebody, that they'll let somebody in. And then that other group of people that they have that codependent tendency, that desire really to they're not going to make it unless you give them everything. Those folks actually need you to distance yourself from them just a little bit so they actually learn to cling to Jesus and not to you. I had a guy one time give me an analogy of pastoring people, and he was talking about making disciples and people maybe that were stuck. And he said, I'd been a lifeguard for a while on the beach in California. And one of the things that we learned is that if somebody was drowning, they were really struggling to swim, that you would swim out to them. And if you swam all the way to them, a lot of times what they would do is they would actually, somebody drowning, somebody struggling, somebody in fear, that they're not really concerned about you. And so what they end up doing is they grab a hold of you and they push you down to get themselves up so that they can breathe. Because really the thing that's concerning them the most is actually surviving and making it. And sometimes you'll run into people as you're caring for them that it's like they really drown the life out of you because they don't know how to make it without really taking everything from you. What this guy said that they would do when that was the case is that they would actually go underwater and they would pop up a little ways away, and then they would throw a life preserver to them. And that allowed them to actually pull them into safety without themselves drowning. And I think a lot of times people who have hearts of compassion, hearts that are invested in people, they end up in this place where they care too much about the person, and they stop caring about themselves, and they allow themselves to get beat up, used up, and they actually aren't good for the person for the long haul. And then this other group of people, they maybe they're struggling, but they're not really ready to change. They're not really ready to take steps forward. And the worst thing you could do is to go after them in such a way that would try to force care on them. Here's the way it works. Luke chapter 8, Jesus is talking about the parable of the sower, and he's got 4 different types of soil. And sometimes people just aren't good soil at that season. Doesn't mean that they won't be. And one of the best things that we can do is actually allow the manure of life to pile up in such a way that it tenderizes the soil. You see, not everybody's at that Kairos timing where it's the right time for them to change, to take a step forward. And the thing that actually can do the most damage is to try to force somebody into change that isn't really ready to change. I love the way Paul writes to the church in Galatia. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 1, he says this. He says, "Carry each other's burdens. In this way, you fulfill the law of Christ." And then he goes on to say, if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself, for each one should carry his own load. You see, there's actually a difference between a load and a burden. And this is a key to actually staying engaged in people's lives, giving pastoral care, leadership in their lives, is that you have to recognize that the best thing that I can help somebody do is help them learn to carry their own burden. You see, that's actually healthy spiritual maturity, is to say, okay, this is your responsibility, and that they would actually be able to carry that load for themselves, their daily responsibility. But then there's another picture where it says at the beginning, carry each other's burdens. And when it's talking about burdens, it's not talking about your small responsibility. When it says carry your own load, it's like, hey, you just carry your own backpack. But there are times in life when crisis hits, when it gets really hard, that you're not just carrying a load, but you're you're actually carrying a burden. And that burden, maybe it's you've lost a family member, or maybe somebody in your small group, maybe they had a miscarriage, and it's like, man, they can't carry that thing by themselves. It's too much for them to carry. And there's actually a responsibility when crisis hits, when difficulty hits, to enter into the picture and actually to help them carry their burden. And so when people are going through life and you're in their lives with them, it's really important to know, okay, what's going on? And is this a circumstance that I need to teach them responsibility and not take responsibility for them, not to care more for them than they're willing to care for themselves? Or is this a situation that's maybe more of a crisis, a complex instance, and I need to actually help them carry that burden for a season so that they can get to that place of health and wholeness to actually then carry their own load. And so I think it's really important not to take so much responsibility for someone that they actually don't ever take responsibility for their own life, because at the heart of shepherding is helping people learn to behave or to believe rightly and to relate healthily. And so you don't want to take so much responsibility for somebody's life that they're not willing to ever take it on their own. And yet when crisis hits, we have to be willing to lay down our lives for people, to help them carry that burden, that thing that's really too heavy for them to carry on their own. And so you may want to ask yourself a question when people are having hardship. Is this thing that they're going through, is this their load, like their personal responsibility that maybe they're looking to push off on somebody else? Or is this really a burden? Is this something that they need help carrying so that they can get to the place of health and comfort so that they can have the breakthrough that they need? And as you do that, you actually teach people how to take personal responsibility, which is huge in pastoral leadership. And a lot of times, people who are maybe more prone to pastoral leadership can move easily into that place of codependency, where more than anything we want to be wanted, we need to be needed, and that place can actually cripple the people around you. It can actually cause a failure to launch. It can keep your spiritual kids stuck in immaturity instead of moving into maturity. And I think one of the greatest things we can do is help people learn to take responsibility and begin to process life on their own, or even in conversation and relationships, so that they move into maturity. I think that's really the heart of pastoral leadership. And so when you're maybe facing a crisis situation, ask, are they really invested in moving forward themselves, or are they just trying to use this crisis really to create maybe unhealthy connection? And when that's the case, do like the lifeguard would do: go underwater, pop out, and then say, okay, here's the key. You need to do this thing. This is your life preserver. You maybe need to go to counseling, or maybe you need to deal with forgiveness on this issue. And I can help you. I can give you some tools, but I can't give you everything in me, and I can't be yours 24/7 because I have other responsibility. And so knowing that difference will make pastoral leadership in people's lives incredibly easier, and it'll give you the longevity to be in it for the long haul.